Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Emanuel Shahar. It's great to have you here.
Good to be here.
Just a little background. This is the Head-On Discord community. We're having over a dozen conversations a week, and it's a community that's really dedicated not just on finding common ground, but also on reaching solutions. And the federation solution is one that comes up quite a lot, and there's been immense curiosity about the federation solution. So it made sense to reach out to one of the architects of the federation solution, being you. So it's an honor to have you here, and maybe please just say a few words about yourself, and then we'll get into federation, what it's all about, its feasibility, and how we could potentially implement it.
Okay, nice to be here. I admire your tenacity. My name is Emanuel Shahar. I'm an aeronautical engineer by training. I worked for the Air Force, and then I worked for another 15 years for the Prime Minister's office in Israel, in Israel and abroad. I'm a political activist since 2003 after I retired. And since 2014, I've been promoting a federation as an alternative solution to the two-state solution, which I believe since then already has no chance for the future. But I think puts it in a nutshell.
Great. And, I think that there is a trend moving away from two states. I think more and more people are understanding that a two-state solution is not so feasible. One, because most people living on the land don't want to split the land. And two, with expansions of settlements, it doesn't seem, what does a Palestinian state even look like? It does seem, though, the alternative many people are promoting to two states is one state, which a federation is essentially a form of one state, but when people describe one state, they're generally not talking about a federation. So on one hand, there's a trend moving towards one state. On the other, there's not nearly enough conversation about what that one state should look like and how we could construct that state in a way that can work. So I'd love to hear from you your vision for a federation and what it looks like.
Okay, you put it in a nutshell. This is really the issue. People are talking about one state, but they don't exactly describe how it's going to look. And it can't look like it looks now, which is a total mess with occupation of parts and settlements here and there and no clear boundaries. So when we talk about federation, we're talking about a form of government which is basically regionalization. Okay, we are splitting the country into regional autonomies, very administrative autonomies. They are not sovereign borders, but they are internal borders which are open for everybody. This is a form of government which is practiced in about 30 countries in the world. 40% of the world's population lives in federation, and they basically have autonomy in their regions and have a federal government which keeps everything together, and in that way provide the best service to their populations.
So it's essentially, one of the concerns many people have with one states is they view this, they have this demographic fear. The concern is what happens when two populations, after 100 years of conflict, are now competing over political and demographic control. Not only is there close to zero political will on the Israeli side for that to happen, but many suspect that would end in bloodshed. So the federation solution seems to solve that by giving more local autonomy, and then in a way that doesn't have this competition for political control.
Well, it doesn't really solve it. It delays it in a way. Because the federation, the way it's structured now, the federation proposal does not include the Gaza Strip. And that's for demographic reasons, because I don't think Israel will agree to a situation where the population balance is 50-50. In the borders, the way the federation is structured right now, Israelis will have a two-third majority. It will be two-thirds Israelis and one-third Palestinians, which is something which politically can work. The Gaza Strip will be a self-independent entity, and it can come on, join the federation at a later stage when both sides are ready. Okay, right now, obviously, I don't think anybody can picture the Gaza Strip as part of one one federation. So in the cantons, everybody, according to the population of the cantons, there are going to be 30 cantons, 20 of them with a Jewish majority, 10 with a Palestinian majority, which is the population balance 2-1. Everybody will, the population will have their cultural and political autonomy to the maximum degree. So we'll have the Palestinian cantons living Palestinian ways and the Jewish cantons living Jewish ways, and the federal government keeping everything in check with the constitution which was written by both peoples.
So this is a form of federation. There are competing versions that do include Gaza. The reason why your version does not include Gaza is because you're looking for a federation that you think Israelis would agree to. You view this as far more realistic.
The idea of our proposal is that it's politically doable. Okay, it's not. It doesn't make sense to offer an alternative to the two-state solution, which is just as unlikely to happen as the two-state solution. So it's got to be acceptable, first of all, to the Israelis, but obviously also to the Palestinians. Okay, so all things considered, I think it's for the Palestinians to have equal rights in a joint Israeli-Palestinian federation and an independent Gaza. I think goes a long way to get them what they want. It's not everything, but it's a long way.
And I recall you saying that you believe that what is beneficial to this form of federation is that it could actually be implemented by Israel unilaterally. They actually don't need the PA or anybody involved. They could tomorrow decide that this is what we're going to do.
I don't suggest that, but I realize that there's a certain advantage to it, because obviously there are going to be people who are going to be against it. But if one side can implement it unilaterally, that takes a lot of firepower away from those against it and make it more likely that they'll cooperate. So that's a big advantage. But of course, that requires Israel to want it in the first place, and we aren't anywhere close at this stage. Okay.
Right. Well, it seems like currently there's no political will to do much besides maintain the status quo. That's where we've been.
There's nothing going right now. And if we can convince Trump that federation is the way to go, I think we have a chance.
Well, it does seem like Trump is trying to finish this second term with some major victories for his legacy. So I think he's working on something. So I guess the question is, how do we put this in front of him? Is that something you're thinking about?
We're working on it. Okay. My Palestinian partner has some connections from the previous Trump administration, so I think we'll be able to put our foot into the door. I don't know how far, but we'll see.
That gives some hope. And do you also view this as a way to solve for tensions within Jewish Israeli society between the ultra-Orthodox and secular Jews?
It can. I mean, the idea that you have the cantons with different populations in by itself already helps people to find their way. Although there won't be like an ultra-Orthodox canton or religious canton. There will be cantons which will be a little bit more religious and a little less religious. But there's no concept of splitting the cantons according to ideological basis. Okay, this is the only reason the cantons are separate are based on ethnic consideration. They won't be pure, obviously, but there'll be a large majority either Jewish majority or a large majority Palestinian majority.
Okay, and because they're geographically relevant, there are some geographies that are much more religious. So those would be, let's say, a Jewish canton that might decide, for example, that they don't want buses on Shabbat, but like the canton that encompasses Tel Aviv and central Israel very well might say no restrictions on Shabbat.
Yeah, that will be possible, provided it's not infringing upon the Constitution, the federal Constitution. Okay, and that's going to be the advantage of a federation is that there's a lot more flexibility. And like you said, you can have a federation where one canton has day of rest, Sunday, Saturday, or Friday, or whatever suits the population there. And also traffic, bus traffic or public transportation on weekends or not. But there has to be some basic freedoms which are guaranteed in the Constitution, and that will have to work out. But I think the only way Israel will ever have a constitution is through a federation, because that makes it clear to everybody that there's a need for a constitution.
And one thing that I always get stuck on is how easily just a few radicals could side rail the peace process, right? So let's say there's consensus that a federation is the way to go, it's implemented. You only need a few % of people who don't like the solution to engage in violence to either side rail it entirely or just change the nature of the federation, right? So let's say there's one canton where some amount of those people they engaged in terror attacks. We would then have a situation where won't that canton then be closed off and people can't travel in freely from that canton into the other ones for security reasons?
Well, there will obviously have to be some sanctions by the federal government against cantons which aren't living up to the requirements of the law. I'm for some reason I hesitate. I'm not sure that's going to be the problem. There obviously will be radicals who are against it on both sides. But once I think the decision has been taken with a large majority or with a considerable majority, I think people will realize that that's the way to go, because they can live their lives in their cantons easier than forcing themselves upon the whole country. So I think it'll work out in the end once everybody gets the idea. Okay, but we have to work on that. It's going to take a long time.
Right. Great. Well, I do see we have a lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to start reading off questions. If anybody would prefer to join the stage and ask their question in person, just raise your hand and we'll bring you on. In the meantime, we'll read off some of the ones we have. Oh, I see someone already raised their hands. Yada, welcome.
Thanks so much for coming, Emanuel.
Nice being here.
Great. So I'm curious how what the Constitution generation process would look like. Would it be similar to the American process, and how would you ensure equal representation of both peoples?
That's going to be a difficult thing. There are a lot of groups in Israel who are working on the Constitution. Unfortunately, they're not associated with the federation, but there are accepted ways of getting a constitution going. Of course, our added challenge is to do it together with the Palestinians. But admittedly, we don't go into much detail regarding that. Okay, there are many constitutions which can be taken as examples. There obviously has to be some form of a council on the Jewish side, where representatives are going to write the constitution, and on the Palestinian side. And I think since the basic requirement of the constitution is to maintain equal rights for both peoples and to make sure individual rights are guaranteed, it's going to be an easier constitution to write than one for Israel itself. Israel hasn't ever been able to or wanted to write a constitution because of the conflict with the religious groups. But since we're talking about a joint country, it's clear that the country has to be secular, or the constitution has to be secular. So that will be easier, and every religious issue will then be solved in the cantons. It's going to be tricky, but it's not going to be that bad. I'm hopeful that once we decide to go that way, we'll find a way. There are, like I said, there are many groups working on this. Unfortunately, none of those groups have an answer to the main problem of any constitution. What do they mean when they say "we the people"? Okay, when you say that in Israel, what do they mean? We the people, the citizens of Israel, all those under Israel's sovereignty, the Jews. That's a big question. So we have a long way to go. Okay, but But I don't want to go into too much detail either. I don't want we want people to take an influence on this process so they become part of it. So
Questions would be left to the cantons.
Say again?
The religious questions would be left to the cantons.
Well, to some degree. Okay. Again, you can't leave them total authority, obviously, because we want a liberal state. Okay. We don't want a situation where we have a halakha canton or a Sharia canton. We don't want that. But they should have some freedoms there, like day of rest, operating of public transport, and certain things which they can decide for themselves in the cantons. Okay, but they can't, of course, prevent people from practicing another religion or only the ones that is in the canton, whatever. So this is going to be a little tricky, but I think there's a lot to be said about starting something new. So I think everybody will be happy to try.
And my last question is the fact that the religious parties have a strong power hold in Israeli government. So how would it be possible to convince them of giving up their power for a secular government?
Well, as long as they get what they want in their cantons, okay, they're not going to make a big fuss about it. The problem is to make sure that they don't get too much power in the cantons, because obviously we're not going to have a religious canton. Okay, so the constitution has to be strong and clear about certain things, but leave some freedom for the religious parties to operate in their where they live in the cantons. And when talking to religious people, I found no major objection to federation. Okay, the political parties, the non-religious parties, are usually object to federation quite a lot, because they realize that distributing the power to the cantons takes the power away from the federal government, and they don't want that. Okay. But people are beginning to realize that we need distributed government, and we need regionality, and we need cantons. So we're going into the right direction.
Thanks so much. I'll let everyone else have their questions.
Thanks, Beata.
Pleasure.
Emanuel, is the reason why you want to ensure the Constitution doesn't allow for any canton to have law based too heavily on either Islam or Judaism, because that would infringe on the rights of other people living in that canton?
Yeah. We want a liberal constitution for a liberal democracy. Okay, we don't want a situation where even in a Muslim Islam majority canton, a Jew can't have a synagogue, or can open a synagogue, or run a kosher butcher store, or whatever. And vice versa, of course. Okay, so that has to be made sure.
Right. Okay, makes sense. We have a question from Adnan. Adnan's asking, what about refugees and right of return?
Okay, the refugee issue is of course critical. What we suggest, first of all, the long-term solution is to have a normal immigration policy. Okay, normal immigration policy means that anybody who wants to live in Israel or in the area of the Federation, if he has roots in the area, be Jewish or be Palestinian, whatever, he can apply for citizenship and for immigration status. That's the long-term view. Okay, in the midterm, there'll be quotas for immigration for Jews and for non-Jews. Quotas based on a proportion of the population, so we don't have a flooding of the country with either Muslims or Jews, but whatever will come will be coming in proportionally, in addition to a certain fixed number of returnees who can come back based on their status as refugees. Okay, this is a critical issue. It's much easier to solve in practice than it is to talk about it. okay? Because when you talk about the return of refugees, the return of Palestinian refugees especially, Jews will go crazy, okay? You mentioned it, no, forget it. We can't talk about this. But if you look at the situation as it is really, it's very unlikely that huge numbers of Palestinians will actually want to return. Many of them want to come for a visit, okay? And there are obviously those whose status has to be improved. And as part of the solution of the refugee problem, is not only the immigration to Israel, but also giving Palestinian refugees citizen status in the places where they are or where they live already. Okay, so we're definitely not going to look at a situation where Palestinian refugees return and take over the buildings which were taken from them in 1947. That's not going to happen. There may be a compensation, restitution, and so on and so forth. But we're not going to undo an injustice through another injustice. Okay, so this is a big project, but it's doable and it's interesting.
Right. Yeah, you bring up a good point. When most Israelis hear right of return, they have this vision of millions and millions of Palestinians coming instantly, and that creates fear amongst them. But I think there's many ways to construct it where you allow for a rate of immigration that the country can handle. Right. There's a certain amount of absorption you can have every year.
Absolutely. If you go to the Palestinian governor of Ramallah and you ask him how many refugees you want to let in, the number he's going to give you is going to be perfectly fine with us. Okay, he's not going to say that bring in 50,000 or 100,000. He's going to say I'll start with 2,000. Okay, right. So everybody is aware of the limitations, and like I said, it's less of a practical problem than an emotional problem, and the ability to talk about it without the emotional baggages connected, which is obviously well-based. People have a reason to be concerned.
Great. Abdullah, I saw you wanted to join stage, and then do you still want to join stage? If so, please raise your hand. We'll get you on. Oh, you are still, sorry. I see your hand is still raised. Welcome, Abdullah.
Hello, how are you, sir? Thank you for
Abdullah.
Thank you for joining us today.
Good to be here.
I've listened to you before, and I can honestly say that I respect your interest and your keenness on addressing the issue in a time where a lot of people neglect, solving the conflict. So I commend you on that. Respectfully, personally, I do not agree with the one-state solution. I think that the best path forward has always been a two-state solution. But I'm just curious, why do you think, a two-state solution is ruled out? Is there really no opportunity to navigate through to revive it in a way? Is that, set and done?
The problem is that we are in a one-state scenario we have been in a one-state scenario for too long. Okay, it's not only the settlements, which are obviously the settlements are an issue, although a sovereign state can remove 150,000 of its citizens from one place to the other. That's not impossible. Okay, the problem is not moving them. The problem is reaching the political decision to do that, and that is not possible. Okay, in the way the Israeli politics have developed, the likelihood of Knesset deciding on that is unlikely. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in the next 20, 30, or 30 years. And every day that passes, it's going to become more unlikely on the ground and also politically. Okay, so the only possibility that I can see that two states is going to come into being at all is if President Trump says tomorrow you're going to do two states, and they're going to make some make-believe two states. Okay, but the other thing is that I think people are beginning to realize that two states is not a good solution for the Palestinians, because the way we look at two states, Israel that is, okay, Israel looks at two states, you over there, we over here, and a tall wall in the middle. Okay, now that is a recipe for economic disaster for the Palestinians. The Palestinians are dependent on Israel's economy. Many of them work in Israel. The Palestinian industry works for Israel, and it's actually a good match. And Israel needs the Palestinian manpower. Okay, if a real border comes into being, that's going to be a disaster, and that's going to be bad for security. Okay, so because the moment the economy isn't good, people like to do something else. Okay, and we know all know what that can be. So I just think we are beyond the path of at the point of no return. I really don't see it happening. And if it's going to be forced upon the players, it's going to be not good. It's not it's really not going to be good. I think both peoples don't want it. They don't want it, and because they want access to the whole country. And the way to do that is in a one-state solution, and that's the best way to do that is in the federation. So I'm sorry, but I can't give you a solace with your two-state belief.
No, that's totally fine. I respect that. That's the beauty of it. But regardless, I have so many other questions. If Adar would let me just ask one more.
Sure, yeah, Abdullah, sure, but I would like to add something to the two-state solution and its current lack of feasibility. I think one of the reasons, we always talk about Palestinian rejectionism, and I think the reason why there's been consistent rejectionism is because it would require Palestinians to agree that it was okay that Jews took half our land. It's requiring them to agree to something that is very, very challenging for them to agree to. It's saying, you know what, fine, you took it from us, have it. A federation allows Palestinians to live in all the land. And then on the Jewish side, I would say it's around 50-50 support for two-state solution, but the 50% that want to keep the land whole are way more ideologically driven than those who want a two-state solution. So the energy of the demographics supports keeping the land whole. So it's almost like using the existing sentiment and finding a solution based on that instead of convincing the majority to change how they feel about something and agreeing to split the land. So I think for that reason, it's also more feasible.
A one-state solution, its capital will be Jerusalem. There's so many questions on Jerusalem. If you could briefly just state how you envision Jerusalem will be, everything regarding Jerusalem, and from the administrative buildings to the social services to the diplomatic missions to the Hashemite custodianship over the holy sites.
Abdullah, once you go the federation way, there is absolutely no problem. Jerusalem will be united. It will be one city with one city hall. There will be Palestinian quarters and there will be Jewish quarters. And the holy places will be run by the religious authorities. They will be under federal. The cantonal government of Jerusalem will not have jurisdiction over the holy places, which will all be governed by the religious authorities of whichever religion they belong to. And it will be a city like any other city. There won't be, again, once you're in one country, okay, the city, according to the quarter system, will operate just like it operates today. We'll have Jewish quarters and Palestinian quarters, except it will be clear that they're all citizens and not only like there are now residents of East Jerusalem. Okay, so everything will be better, hopefully.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Abdullah, you're welcome to stay on. We're going to bring on Captain here as well, but I'm happy for this to be a fun little group discussion. So if you want, stick around. Captain here, you've been invited on stage, so you just need to accept the invite. In the meantime, we do have a lot of questions in the Q&A. Oh, Captain here, you're here. Okay, the floor is yours. You just need to unmute yourself. Captain here. Yep, there we go.
All right.
Welcome.
Okay, hi. First of all, thank you so much for the interesting conversation. I had a question in the chat. I'll repose it here, and I'll give a little bit of context ahead of time, just to see how you would respond to this concern from the Israeli side. So essentially, the question that would be asked by many Israelis would be this. Given the context of Islam and Christianity being the major religions in the regions the Jews have been in, and persecution the Jews have faced from those religions, including legal, social persecution, as well as pogroms, genocide. Given that, how would it be different if it were in a federal state with initially it would start off as a Jewish 2/3 majority, but that could change, and a constitution could also change. So the idea of the Jewish state was to create a Jewish majority where they'd be able to sit by and do nothing, or to actually persecute the Jews. How would a federal state solve that issue?
Okay. First of all, I personally don't think that the struggles in this area are a religious struggle. I think there are struggles over rights, over land, over political rights and land and economical rights. The religious issue is being used by both sides to try to make the conflict intractable. Okay, so in a federation, we basically take the religious issues out, because the state is going to be a civil state. It's not going to be an ethno-nation state as it is now. Okay, and the state doesn't give a damn what religion its citizens are. Basically, like in the United States or like in many European countries that are secular, or even if they're not secular, the law says that everybody has to be treated the same way. So over time, since the situation of everybody will improve economically and politically, the religious tension is going to dissipate to a large degree. Okay, so that's why I think will be the long-range result of having a federation. You have to obviously give people religious freedoms, but not to the extent that they can infringe upon their neighbors. So like I said, the Muslim majority cantons can practice their Islam, but they can't have Sharia in the Muslim cantons. Okay, like the Jews can't have halakha run the Jewish cantons.
Just to clarify, so my point was not that there's the fear right now that the Palestinian, or let's say the Islamic side, would persecute the Jews, but the idea is, the reason why the state was created in the first place is because of a very long and very well recorded history of persecution of Jews by other religions for religious purposes, including in Europe, including in the Middle East, North Africa. And the idea of the Jewish state is, it's going to be a liberal democratic state, like a sort of a Western-style democracy. Yeah. And B, the dual purpose is that would be a safe haven for Jews, so that this thing cannot happen.
Well, that's what's going to happen. That's the only way it's going to be a safe haven for Jews is going to be if it is run like a federation. Because obviously the way Israel has been running and has been moving also in the Zionist point of view, it's not providing safety. It's become the most dangerous place for Jews in the world. Not only is it the most dangerous place for Jews in the world, it also makes the whole world more dangerous for Jews, which wasn't the idea of Zionism. Because what?
Yeah, so I don't disagree. The way it's happened, the way it's unfolded, it's definitely turned out that way. But the question is, how do you solve the issue of a religious minority, which is persecuted by the religious majorities in the area, and make sure that that cannot happen?
First of all, you can't make sure it cannot happen. You can see what's happening in the United States. You see what's happening in Israel politically now. What you can do is try, and that's exactly what the federation does. A democratic, liberal federation will try to make this a country with equal rights, where everybody's protected, and the rights of everybody are protected according to a constitution, and that is rigidly applied. Okay, you can have an insurance on that that's going to be forever, but you're going to have to try and go for that. That's what we're doing. We're trying to make that happen, because Israel's obviously going in the right direction right now, and I think a civil state is the only way to go. The only way for Jews to be safe is ironically in the civil state, not in a Jewish state, not in a Jewish ethno state.
Emmanuel, with that being said, what would the name of the state be? What would the flag be? Obviously, it would have to change.
Like, I had a talk with Emanuel about that. Then listen, if we have equal rights, okay, that's not going to be an issue. The way we propose it right now, the name is going to be Israel, and the flag is going to be the Israeli flag. But obviously, if this works out, it's going to be possible to change the name. The politically correct name should be the Federal Republic of Israel and Palestine. Okay, that obviously is the perfect name. But that wouldn't, at this time, that wouldn't go. Okay, I'll be happy to have a civil federation with the name of Israel and everybody having equal rights. Okay, we can go to the Federal Republic of Israel and Palestine at the next step, and we can also talk about another flag, and we can talk about adding another part to the national anthem, which would also be more inclusive. Okay, I think when we get to that stage where we start arguing symbols, I think we're in good shape. Okay, so let's get there before we start haggling about.
Those are the final steps.
What do you say? What did you say? What did you say?
So you're saying, the symbols, the flags, the names, the anthems, these are all final steps once the big chunks are.
I think there are steps which can be taken on the go. Okay, this will come naturally once we've started to go the right way. Things will become a lot easier. Okay, because people will realize that we have to do certain things which haven't been done before, and it'll be easier to overcome emotionally. Okay, so I think the federation as is not going to be not going to be a thing to be done in 2 months. This is going to be a decade-long process. I gave once a presentation to a Swiss audience, okay, and they know something about federation. All right, so they asked me how long do I think it'll take to implement. So I said, I'd say 10, 15 years. They laughed at me. They said it's going to take at least 50 years. Okay. So we have to take that into consideration. But once we go that way, it's going to be, I think, I'm not sure that it'll have to take 50 years. The last country to federate was Nepal, and they federated from between 2008 and 2015. It took them 7 years, and they did it on their own, okay? And they're a large country, 32 million people, and so it's feasible to do that once you have the right incentive, and I think we do.
So I just want to point out a pattern. Emanuel, your view and your plan is deeply rooted in pragmatism, which I think often causes tension, because what often is the most pragmatic approach is not the approach that makes the most amount of people happy. And I think that's some of the tension we see. What about Gaza? What about right of return? What about symbolism? There's no perfect answer for any of these, but you don't see any way to include those in phase one in a way that we can get the Israeli public to agree on. So you're optimizing for feasibility, which I think is important.
I want to say something to that. First of all, we have to include Gaza in the sense that we have to clearly discuss what's happening to Gaza. We can't just say we're doing the federation without Gaza, and not deal with Gaza. Gaza has to be dealt with completely and utterly, also in the framework of doing a federation without Gaza. Okay, but we have to make sure that we prepare the thought that Gaza will eventually possibly also join us. Okay, that has to be clear to everybody for the benefit of the situation. So, and it still makes it feasible. It still makes it feasible. I don't quite agree with you that pragmatism definitely must incur tension. I think people are more likely to be pragmatic than insist on certain issues that are not pragmatic. But I think we can argue either way.
Great. Justin, we're going to bring you on, but we're also going to take a question from the audience as well. Before you ask your question, Justin, just one from the audience. If we only prioritize those willing to speak, it's kind of unfair to those who, for whatever reason, don't want to join stage. So we'll go back and forth. This is a question from Nico. How does this differ from the U.S. Federation in its construct, and what risks do you foresee with this proposal being geographically in the Middle East? Do you think there's a unique set of challenges?
Well, first of all, it doesn't have to be different from the United States at all. We have to decide what kind of federation we want. There are about 30 federations in the world. They all are similar and different from each other. Each have their own adaptations to their own requirements. And so the difference would, similarity offhand would be that they're it's like states, like the states in the United States, they have their own autonomy up to a certain degree. But the difference would be that they're divided according to ethnic considerations, which is not the case in the United States. Okay, so the challenges are, I think, challenges are less for our area. I think it's a better way to integrate into the area. I think if we become a federation, Israel will finally become a part of the Middle East. It will not be an outlier of the European colonial powers. Okay, then we will seriously integrate, and it will be easier to interact with the neighboring countries for certain, because the conflict with the Palestinians will have been resolved. Okay, but if they become part of the state, okay, automatically we become part of the Middle East, and that's a huge advantage.
Thank you.
And we may be an inspiration to the neighboring countries of doing like right now. Syria is also considering going on federation.
Interesting.
Good. You mentioned Syria.
Wait, Abdullah.
What happened to the Golan Heights issue?
Abdullah, real quick, just because I want us to have some order here. Justin, the floor is yours, and then Abdullah, you can take it afterwards.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned Syria. The federation idea was actually part of what wanted to be established in the 1920s with the Arab Congress. So the federation idea is not something that's new to the Arab side in the Levant. This is what they wanted after the Ottoman Empire, was a federation. Even if you look at some of the early writings of Faisal, he wanted a sort of a British system where you had a monarch and a parliamentary federation, and there was questions whether it should include Iraq or not, but from Hejaz up to Syria, including Palestine, Lebanon, and today's Jordan.
So did the Jews, by the way, in the 30s.
The
Zionists wanted a federation.
It was pretty much sabotaged by the French and the British, mainly the French. The French were seriously against it and actually used military force to stop it.
It's always the French.
Yeah, so there's actually an interesting book, but maybe I'll share it in the server one day about this. Mr. Emanuel, I think this is the third time I've been in a call with you. Some other groups that I participate in, and the issue that I wanted to ask you was from a Palestinian perspective. I'm a Palestinian from Jerusalem, and I would say that the concern that we have is I think this kind of plan would be accepted among a lot of Palestinians that live on the bit between the river and the sea, because it does bring a sort of stability because we know the way that Palestinians are sort of integrated into the not just the economy, but the infrastructure, the road system, the healthcare system, etc. However, the issue with Gaza is that I look at this from a perspective as this looks like this is the final dissection of the Palestinian people. So we have, you're advocating saying that Palestinians that live abroad, like in Jordan and in Lebanon and Syria, they're going to get citizenship of those countries and a limited right of return. And then you're going to have a separation of Gaza and then the separation of the Palestinians that live, that would be incorporated into a federation or a state of Israel. And I think that for Palestinians, there's still a sense of identity that I feel that we're going to be erased. So what are we going to become, Israelis, or our counterparts in Jordan going to become Jordanians, or the ones in Syria going to become Syrians? And Gaza, I don't know, they'll just create a third identity. And this is very problematic. And the issue is that, is this going to also be applied? Because I can say, well, Jews have citizenship in America, they have citizenship in Latin America and in Europe, etc. Why is that not acceptable for them? Why do they need a state to come to? Why do they need a homeland to come to or have a right to come to? And I think this is problematic. And when you say that, the third part of my question, I mean, if you want me to say it, is that when you, and I think Adar also just reiterated that this is a pragmatic or a situation that we can deal with right now, I don't think you should knock out the two-state solution, considering that the two-state solution, especially in post-October 7th Israel-Palestine, is still something that probably is a lot more viable, because considering that settlements are where, and there are 80% of settlements are where, and 4% of the West Bank. You know, when you say 150,000 Jews would have to be removed, I think a price of removing 150,000 settlers to make peace for 15 million people is a small price and a much more practical path to take, rather than telling two people who obviously don't want to live in the same country together, hey, we're all going to live happily ever after in one country.
Okay. First of all, I really like your question. Okay, this issue of identity is obviously a key issue. Okay, and the way there's no clear and good answer to that. But I want to start from the end. Okay, when you say about removing 150,000 settlers, like I said, a sovereign country can't do that, but it doesn't help us if we cannot come to the decision to do that. And that I'm pretty sure I speak on behalf of most Israelis that they will not support any of that removal of 150,000 settlers. And what you said after 7th of October, the likelihood of a Palestinian state has decreased tremendously. Right now, I think in both peoples, the support for a two-state solution is less than 40%. In Israel, it's less than 30%. Okay, now I don't necessarily think polls are everything, okay, and they can change it pretty quickly, but they give us a direction. I just don't think the two-state solution is viable. I don't think it's implementable. I think it's a bad solution under our circumstances. When I answered to Abdallah before, I explained why I think it's not. I don't know whether you heard that answer. That it's bad for the Palestinians. I think we have to take into consideration that not every national group in the world has its own has self determination in their own nation state. The reason that we have a nation state is pure coincidence. Okay, a confluence of all kinds of things happened at or around the same time, so we ended up with the state. Could have been. It could have also been that we didn't get a state. Okay, but we did get a state. So now the Palestinians are not in a position to create their own state. They're just not, and nobody's going to hand it to them on a silver platter. So I think all things considered, it's going to be much more difficult and much more disadvantageous for the Palestinians to try to stick to the two-state solution. I think it's much more important to try to work towards a federation, because that's a likely way to go. I think the support among the Palestinians is considerable for a federation, like you said. it'll be easier. Gaza is a big issue, but the way we can prevent the fact that the separation of Gaza will contribute to like a separation from the Palestinians is by making sure that Gaza will be accessible, like every part will be accessible to every other part. Okay, so just like Palestinians in Gaza will remain part of the Palestinian people, like Jews in America remain part of the Jewish people. Okay, so you'll be like the Jews in a way. You are already. So that's all I can say. Okay, I'm going to work hard on the federation.
Thank you. Now, I see we have a fair bit of questions. We will unfortunately not have time to address all of them. We are going to wrap this up at the end of the hour. What I will ask, if you feel like your question has not been addressed and it's very important to you, please re-ask it. And to those who are viewing, please give a thumbs up to the question that you would most like to be addressed, and then we will prioritize that. So we're going to do this democratically. In the meantime, does anybody on stage have something they would like to add or say?
Going back to the Syria part, Syria now is not the Syria that Israel had faced for the past half century. The Assad regime is gone. The brutality of such a neighbor is gone, obviously, and the new administration, the transitional government of Syria, has expressed that it does not want to engage in conflict. It is exhausted from conflict. That's a good sign. The Syrians, after they put everything together and move forward, if they express their interest to engage in, peace with Israel, what's the status on the Golan Heights? Is there still going to be a land for peace initiative with Israel regarding Syria? What's the case with that?
This present government is not going to be partner to anything. Seriously speaking, it's just not. Okay, I'm sad to say it, but that's the situation. Okay, unless the U.S. administration says give it back to Syria, okay, there's no way that's going to happen. Okay, it's just not going to happen. And I'm sorry, we're just not there. The way Israel presently views its situation in the Middle East, it just doesn't think. I don't think it's in a position where it wants to return land to anybody.
Adar, can I ask him one more question?
Yeah, we're going to do one from the audience. Yeah, we're going to do one from the audience, and then you both can ask a final question, and then we'll wrap it up. Abay asks, how does the system of governance change under a federal system? Do the different cantons have representation in addition to direct representation? So what does the actual federal government look like? Is it a parliament? Is it completely changed?
It's a parliament. The Knesset will have two houses and a lower house, which represent the population overall. And accordingly, the cantons will send members of as many as members of parliament as is proportional to their population. And each canton will send two upper house senators, so to speak, to represent the canton regardless of its population size and its size in general. So similar to the American system.
Is that two branches or three branches of government we're talking?
It's three branches. It's just like it's an executive, a judicial, and a legislative. It'll be the same.
So right, the Congress is representative to population size, and then senators would just be two per canton.
Two per canton, yeah.
Okay, and then the executive branch, anybody can run for president. If they get elected, they get elected.
Anybody can run for president. Absolutely.
Is it based on coalition? Is it popular vote, or is there an electoral college type system?
There won't be an electoral college. That for sure. We're not going to put our healthy head into a sick bed, as the saying goes. No. Again, we want the people to take take issue with these items, with these things, and help determine what the right way is. We don't want to put something in front of it and say this is it, because obviously that's going to not going to work. Everybody should have a look at it and say, well, we want that kind of system or that.
Healthy head in a sick bed is is an idiom I've never
Hebrew.
heard of, but I like it. Does that come from Hebrew?
Yeah. ראש פרי למיטה חולה.
Okay,
Like you
nice.
said.
Actually, I guess it's not an idiom. That would be a proverb. Cool. Justin, floor is yours, and then we'll give it to Captain Hare, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure. I agree that when you say that the two-state solution is definitely something it's not a good solution. I don't think anybody would say that they would agree with that. But the thing is that some people might say that it's a solution that can happen now, because we in the East Jerusalem and in the West Bank, we feel like the carpet is being pulled from underneath our feet. The settlements are encroaching. The settlers are becoming more wild. Yesterday, settlers rampaged through Jerusalem, and they're going through. And I don't think there's an Israeli will to stop this. Yesterday's headline were 11 settler activists were arrested, and 3 police officers were hospitalized. Now, had they been Palestinian, the headline would have been 11 Palestinians were killed and no Israeli police officers were this. So the question is that the two-state solution may not be the best solution, but maybe could it be a path to a type of unified federation? Because we have a problem that we need to address that yesterday, not tomorrow.
I understand. First of all, some of us who were working on the federation proposal are thinking along those lines of maybe putting up a two-state construct before going to federation. The problem with that is that it's just too difficult to get a decision on the 2 states. Okay, so it'll be easier to go towards the federation in a staged way, because we are basically already in a federal sort of arrangement where certain areas are controlled by certain elements. Okay, it's just a total mess. But to come to a decision of 2 states, I just don't see it happening. Okay, 3/4 of the Israeli Knesset are dead set against it. Now, if the U.S. government, like I said, okay, there may be some help from the U.S. government if Trump says we want to do 2 states, and you get your act together and you do 2 states. Maybe we'll be able to do something like that, and that may actually be a way to start with 2 states and then go over to the federation. But if that doesn't happen, then obviously the Israeli government is going to try very hard not to have that happen. Okay, if that's not going to happen, I just don't see 2 states to come. Okay, and I feel really, really sorry for you guys in East Jerusalem and in the West Bank. Okay, I have a friend of mine who wanted to come visit me in Netanya. He lives in Jericho. He was stuck at the exit of Jericho for 3 hours yesterday. They didn't let him out, and for 2 hours today. Okay, that's not the worst that can happen. Okay, so the situation is untenable. The status quo has to change, and the faster the better. I just don't think 2 states is the faster at this time. Again, unless the Trump administration puts in a big word.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Emanuel. Thank you.
Captain Hare, the floor is yours.
Emanuel, I believe this has been, I'm looking for the right word here. It's been portrayed as the sort of the moderate or reasonable solution, pragmatic, that was the word. I would like to push back. So, according to several analysts who cite survey data for the Palestinian side, their analysis is that Palestinians are willing to compromise for short-term, but long-term maximalism, where there would be a Palestinian-controlled state. That's on one side. On the other side, the fastest growing segment of the Israeli population is the very religious section, which is also disproportionately right-wing and messianic Zionist. So given that you have these large portions of the population on each side that would still be pushing for their own political goals, even after federation, why would this not become exactly like 1928, for example, before there was when there were all the commissions and before the partition plan, why would we not get to the same state where you have two factions warring over what will be the future of the state, which can be modified because constitutions can be changed, governments can be overthrown? Why would we not get to the exact same state, and why would we not get another civil war?
Because first of all, we've been through a lot of this stuff, and we should by now know better. And there's never a guarantee. I can't tell you that what's going to happen is not going to be worse in the end. I'm just going to say that I'm looking at the situation. The way to get out of it, the best way to get out of it at this time is through federation. The way to make it happen is to work on it jointly together and put in a big effort to keep in mind what happened in the past to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I don't trust long-term predictions for anything, not for population growth, not for ideological development, and not for anything else. Okay, anything which is longer than two or 3 years is just not reasonable under the circumstances. But it's difficult to argue with somebody like you who raises these questions, which are obviously legitimate questions, because it's difficult to counter them. Okay, I can't tell you this isn't going to happen, or I just can't. Okay, it may happen, but I like to think that we are rational people, or most of us are rational people, or many of us are rational people, and we'd like to try to avoid mistakes that we did before, and we're paying a very heavy price, and I think Israel is paying a very heavy price, and the Palestinians are definitely paying a very heavy price. So there's a lot of vested interest in making these prices, lower these prices, and actually get our act together and start working on something jointly, which can be really worthwhile. And I think a federation is.
Great.
I
Captain,
do think one outcome is more likely than the other.
Say again?
Yeah. What makes you think one outcome is more likely than the other? If you thought that the positive outcome is more likely, then it would make sense to go for it, or if you thought there's a good chance, or if you thought that it's not likely, you wouldn't.
Obviously, I think there's a very good chance of it happening because it's something new. People don't know about it. There's a lot of precedents. They can look around and see many countries, 40% of the world's population lives in federation, so they must know something. It's a system of government which is good for most of the countries where it's being practiced. And there's a lot of advantages. The distribution of power is something that Israel's working on anyway. The Palestinians have their own system, which is also it's a quasi-federation. They have provinces. So it's going into the right direction politically and economically, and I think it's a positive development. So I'm all optimistic.
thank you. Thanks for joining, Captain, here for those questions. We'll do one last question because I think it's very relevant and the answer should be short. But Abe is asking, are there resources, online resources, prominent Palestinian leaders who are proponents of the federation solution? So where could people look to find more, and who else is supporting this?
They can. First of all, who else is supporting it? I don't think there are many leading Palestinians who would lend their voice publicly towards the federation. Still, the two-state solution is not off the stage, and the Palestinian Authority is making a huge effort to leave it on the stage. But everybody can go to our website, which is www.federation.org.il, and read it there in 5 languages, and know more about it, or turn to me, or Adar will refer you to my mail. Okay, so it's all there.
Awesome. Emanuel, thank you so much. This was a real pleasure. We'd love to have you back at some point, so we'll definitely be in touch.
Pleasure to all mine. I'd be happy to be back.
Awesome. And now that you're in the server, feel free to engage. We're doing over a dozen conversations a week now, so you're welcome to join that anytime.
Okay. Looking forward.
Great. And with that, we'll call Abdullah back to the stage because